Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I think I introduced myself yesterday. I'm working with World Agroforestry. We are now called C4 ICRAF because we merged with C4. And I'm a chair of the Environment Group of the African Academy of Science, and I'm founding member, board member of the International Union of Agroforestry, serving as vice president. So my talk will be on agroforestry for climate adaptation and resilience of people and ecosystems. Since we are talking about agroforestry and climate change adaptation, actually listening to your talks seems that these are the answer for our problems. Yeah. So I will zoom in into I will focus into two major goals of our time. That is food security. We have about 2 billion more people to feed by 2050. So overall food production has to increase by 70%. We have talked already about the food crisis we are in already. And we have, at the same time, we have to adapt climate change. We have this 1.5 degree goal, and agriculture and land use, they emit about 30% of emission, and they have to be part of the solution. And agriculture and forests and trees are also impacted by climate change, and they have to adapt at the same time. And Joyce, yesterday, she talked about how vulnerable Africa is. In general, we have about 3.6 billion people who are vulnerable to climate change. This is on top of the development challenges we have. I just want to highlight some of them, like land scarcity, land degradation and deforestation, the scarcity of food availability, accessibility, affordability. Women, they really work about 4 to 6 hours per day to collect fuelwood. And if they can, they also, if they find, they use animal dung for fuelwood. And this is also causing health to women. And of course, because of the pandemic, also fuelwood consumption has increased, and we will have about 1 billion people by 2025 who are dependent on fuelwood in Africa. This is also, there is also shortage of fodder availability and diversity. Some of the animals are really clever. They jump on top of the trees, they support each other. And there is also heat stress problem, and trees, you can see, they serve as shade. Of course, this is really climate change is making it worse. This is a picture of 2022. Last 2 months in East Africa, in Somalia, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, these oxen are dying, and people are being used as, for clown. It is not 100 years before. It is 2022. And it's not only about animals, also trees are, of course, the solution, but trees are also dying. In Europe, in Africa, this is a global tree mortality graph figure here, and there is increase of forest fires and pests. And if it's getting dry and warm, tree mortality will also increase. This is a big, really, issue to consider in the climate when we talk about ecosystem services and climate change. Of course, there are a lot of global initiatives. It's a sustainable development goals, the RED+, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Bone Challenge, the African 100 to restore degraded lands, the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, the Glasgow Leader Declaration. All of them, they are talking about the enormous potential of nature to address this development challenge and the climate challenge. So we see that the challenges are interwoven, and the solution should be based on integrated approach. So can agroforestry be part of the solution? My answer is yes. Because of its multifunctional properties, agroforestry can address the adaptation issue, the mitigation issue, the biological, the biodiversity issue, On top of that, it can, for food security, for job opportunity, for energy security, for livelihood, inequity, and injustice. It can address all these issues because it's done locally. As you can see, trees can provide different products like food, medicine, like income and fodder, and they serve also many regulatory services like soil fertility, biodiversity, in the hydrological cycle, and so on. In fact, in one way or another, agroforestry can address all of the 17 development goals, directly or indirectly. And agroforestry is not new. It has been there for centuries in Africa, in Latin America, and also in Asia. Just to show you a few examples of traditional agroforestry practices, like the home gardens in Ethiopia. This is in Gedio agroforestry system, especially here, when you look from far distance, you assume that it's a forest. But it's agroforestry, and within 0.5 hectares, you find about 30 different species. It's so diverse. So it absorbs shock. And the people here assume that God manifests himself with creatures like trees, mountains, and rivers. They regarded nature as a legitimate intermediary between creator, they call it the sky god, and people. But we were talking about erosion of this cultural, with nature. Is it still intact? This is something to study. Is it still resilient to climate? Are they facing other issues? It's also, there are a lot of gaps to study. But this is really unique. We also have this Moringa-based agroforestry system. This is registered as World Heritage Site because of its unique bench terracing and the Moringa and intercropping systems. It has been there for 500 years. Also, when you look at the three commodities, we have coffee agroforestry system. We have the cacao agroforestry system in Cameroon, Ghana, and we are introducing it also in Cote d'Ivoire because it was monoculture planting and really a lot of problems because of that. We have also the parkland agroforestry systems in West Africa, like the Baobab agroforestry system and Vitellari agroforestry system. But again, are the farmers benefiting from all these three commodities? Probably not. It's the middlemen who are benefiting in all this coffee and cacao and other products coming from agroforestry. So improved processing and value chain marketing, the products is really needed. We also have this farmer-managed natural regeneration. This is just to give nature, to take its own course, to regenerate, and especially in dry lands, also in the green, in the Africa, these natural trees are coming because we protect it from open grazing, and also, of course, there are silvicultural management. This is also very important for silvo-pastoral agroforestry system. Of course, also agroforestry is also taking ground in the north. This is in France. You see the vines among the pines because the vines are ripening 2 to 3 weeks earlier than 50 years ago. Now they are planting trees to slow down the ripening of agroforestry. Actually, maybe before you were using also agroforestry, now it's only tractors and this modernization. Maybe there is something to learn from Africa as well to use this also with the farming system. So as you can see, there is no single classification scheme for, that can be universally applied. But what is unique about agroforestry system is that the deliberate inclusion of woody perennials on farms, and that leads to significant economic, ecological interaction between the woody and non-woody system components. Agroforestry is not only ecologically feasible, but it's also profitable. But it's not adopted everywhere. So what should we do to increase its adoption? It's really addressing all the issues, but what can be done to increase its adoption? So I will just mention some few learned lessons so far, because we are learning every day, every time, because there are many issues coming along the way. So I will start from, it's very important to recognize that there is no silver bullet agroforestry practice. We use option by context approach. That means to co-produce context-specific data and management options based on the traditional, local, scientific knowledge, agroecological conditions, and farmers' circumstances. Of course, there are common desirable traits for climate adaptation, like diversifying the species, to use climate information, bioenergy, to integrate different aspects of, it's not only just planting trees. The other is, we know that ecosystem degradation, biodiversity loss, and poverty are interlinked. Also climate change. If we want to address climate change, this interconnectedness underlines the value of working across sectors. Not only the tree people, but also the water, the animal, and the institutions, the policy. So the landscape concept, the landscape approach provides us the opportunity to address the production, biodiversity, ecosystem services, the policies, institutions of formal and informal, and the livelihood strategies at the same time. Some of them, they are complementary. Some of them, they are competitive. So we have to really negotiate with different stakeholders and institutions. So using the landscape concept is very important. And from Brazil, you were talking about people as a center. This is really critical. I would like to highlight that. Many people made the mistake that, okay, we have projects that people will implement and that's participatory, but no, it is not. It's about really co-producing, asking the people, what do you want? That decisions are made on shared vision with clear action-oriented purposes and values of the community. So this is my project in Ethiopia, Lemo. So we go there, we discuss, we ask the people, how do you see your home state? How do you value it? It's not only the home state, also the landscape, about participatory visioning. So you see here, in this area, it's all eucalyptus, even on the stream, they planted eucalyptus. Is this the right tree? No, it's not the right tree. Eucalyptus is not appropriate on the river system. But we cannot tell them, okay, cut it. It takes time to really convince them this is the wrong species and what should they plant. So after understanding the system, we plan a project and we go and present with, this is what we understand, shall we do this and do this? And we get feedback. So this co-learning process, it allows, institutions to refine, to match their agroforestry practices and what, project options, the sites and circumstances. And also it inspires the community with common purpose for action. The other is value of ecosystems. Climate negotiation, they talk about carbon. But if you ask the farmers, it's not carbon. It is about the honey, it's about the grass productivity, it's about the crop yield, it's about the improved irrigation because of the tree, tomatoes, the vegetables, and so on. So we don't give value of the ecosystems. And sometimes even the cultural values, the invaluables may have the highest value for them. So it's very important to recognize the value of the ecosystems. And you were talking about water. In the climate change discourse, water is ignored, but if you ask the farmers in Tigray, this is after 15 years, you see this really water regenerating. And if you ask the people there, I could talk for hours about this process, but we don't have time. But I can tell you that when you talk to them, they will say, we spend our time restoring upstream, using different techniques, biological and physical, and the ATM machine is downstream because they can grow vegetables, they can harvest twice or three times per year. I included this graph from our paper because yesterday you were talking about the Africa Green Wall, and you can see here we took samples from Burkina Faso and Ethiopia, and we found a large-scale atmospheric teleconnections. This indicates that the recycling of atmospheric moisture from evapotranspiration, the role of trees also in the hydrological cycle. This has to be also really included in the climate discourse. The other is incentives, institutions, governance mechanisms support resilience. Agroforestry takes time. It takes about 3-8 years, and we need incentives and strategic investment. When you say investment, is not maybe only giving cash, can be improved varieties, extension, research, improved marketing, and it can be farmer-to-farmer visit. So this after all that processes, we provided them improved varieties of fruits, fodder, vegetables, potato, and all that. And after 3 years, you see this is the result. Farmers are happy, they get income, they improve their, especially during COVID, they really appreciated it. You can see the fruits, and it makes you really happy. So about monitoring and evaluation, it's new business models in agroforestry is also important. And I think we talked about indicators, maybe also the resilience and adaptive capacity should be a key indicator for climate adaptation, not only carbon sequestration. And we talked also about scientific capacity yesterday. Do we need science? Yes, we need science. We need basic science, we need applied science, we need social science. This is the famous spiderware agroforestry practices, and the farmers, for example, they just prune it, and they lose a lot of yield because the tree is really important not to prune it during growing period, and you see the yield, comparing the yield. But on top of that, now the climate is changing and trees are dying. So if we plant the wrong tree, if we give them the wrong tree to plant, it's maladaptation. So we have to make sure that what we plant is resilient to climate change as well. So this is a big decision because crops, you can change it in 1 year, but trees takes decades, even centuries. So one of the most prominent approaches is to study their retrospective performance in terms of growth, functional and structural traits, mortality and reproduction. And this is a lab that I established also in Nairobi, and it's training really students. Now I have about 8 PhD students currently. So it's very important to see, you see the trees, but inside they are changing. This is a cacao from Cote d'Ivoire. You see, it looks like a war zone, and they are dying. So again, this is about tree health and forest health, and it's actually like the COVID and all the HIV situation, but again, I will need 1 hour to talk about this. So yeah, it's very important. The other is trees are dying visibly, but there is also change. Using the isotopes, we found that the intrinsic water use efficiency is changing, increasing, be it in the Amazon, in Asia, in Bangladesh, in Africa, all increasing. So what is the tipping point? And what is the impact in the long run in the hydrological cycle? I talked about the importance in the water cycle, the water vapor. Trees are closing their stomata more often. And what does that mean? We will have maybe drier atmosphere in the future. I don't know. This needs to be studied. And yeah, I would like to say, problems are there. I think the narration is very important. We can consider climate change as an opportunity, to address the development challenge and the climate challenges, and the time for action is now. We are living really in a difficult time. Disease, drought, famine, war, inequity, and migration. And I'm not going to talk about the Ukraine war. Many people know about it. It is there in the media, but the war in Tigray is nobody knows. You can see, this is a picture that came out from, luckily, a French journalist sneaked into Tigray, and you see the kids here, they are climbing on top of the tree. It's not for fun like other people, but just to collect, survive by eating wild fruit trees. Those kids, we are losing about more than 1,000 kids every day. See here, dying. So you can see the role of trees also in conflict, not only in climate change. So I may kindly also request the academics to take note of this. And at least, you talked about the UN system yesterday. The climate change is not even really emergency. They are not even doing anything looking at this. Nothing is happening. And at least to pray that maybe God intervenes. So, thus we need peace and stability for climate change. In Tigray, I talked about restoration. From 3%, they changed it to 19% of vegetation improvement, but it's all gone. 30 years of work to restore degraded lands, all gone because of stupid work. So, other thing Barbara was talking about, urban agroforestry is really also, we can use this option by context to bring farming into the urban system, and agrovoltaics is also solar and also planting vegetables, to use the space effectively. Actually, productivity is even much higher under the solar energy. And we are using Africa's resources, we are losing them in the Mediterranean Sea. So we can invest in green infrastructure, create job opportunity. So we need to revise maybe our curriculum, interdisciplinary programs in education, training, research, and also policy. Plant trees, because trees, they really cool down about 12 degrees centigrade in cities. So the other is we are talking about adaptation, but also we need mitigation. We need both. And the potential is huge. You were talking about the trade-off, between when we plant, we are going to lose maybe for food and stuff. But we have about 2.2 billion hectares of degraded lands that we can plant, we can restore to actually produce more. So we have 1 billion hectares for mosaic restoration. And by doing that, we can restore sequester about 0.9 to 1.5 gigaton of CO2. And by halting deforestation, we can even restore more to 3.6 to 2 gigaton of CO2 per year between 2020 to 2050. So this is a big opportunity. So we need to investment at scale. What I showed you is just pilot project, but it needs investment, scale it up. Yeah. So what's important, I showed you all this international pledges, but what is missing? What's missing is action. Action on the ground. So we need action, 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 and it's now or never. So I think, I said it all. It's really critical to have community engagement and participation at all levels. agroforestry is about people. Multi-level engagement is very important. Recognize every space, be it on rural or urban setting, and to create synergy among different sectors. Water, soil, trees, and commitment of local leaders. It's really, really critical. Local leaders, an extension officer, to inspire, as I said, the community with common purpose. And I can't say it more and more that local leaders are critical. So in enabling conditions, like ecological policy, tenure issue, gender issue, market, formal and informal institutions is really critical. And as I said, we need peace and stability to adapt and mitigate. Thank you so much.